record this right now just for later. But I want to go through week 4, which was the JavaScript. Um, so we didn't do, a good lecture on the JavaScript. We were doing the terminal stuff and the Git stuff, and hopefully most of you get the Git. If you didn't get the Git, then we can go over it again, how to submit the assignment with Git and all that. If you're new and you haven't seen it, then just meet with me after, and also we can do on Sunday or Monday. But I'm here too after the lecture. So and check your emails and all that. So I will communicate with you over there. So let's get started with JavaScript. JavaScript is the #1 language in the world. So it's literally like the most after the most paid job when you know JavaScript. Developers get like 6-figure jobs just because they know JavaScript and they know how to work and build stuff with JavaScript. Is the #1 language in every sector of programming and coding, basically. So it's a top language everywhere. Does that mean it's like the best language ever? No. It has like flaws and stuff and issues, but the cool thing is JavaScript works with the browser. So the browser we have right here, as you guys can see, the only programming language the browser works with is JavaScript, right? Not Python, not Java, not C, not C Sharp, none of that. So all the browsers, Chrome and all of them, they work with JavaScript only. That's why it's like the most, the most famous, or the most used programming language. So how does it work with the browser? If we right click and open inspect, and we're gonna go over this quickly because we did the last time. If you open your inspect is basically, if you're a developer, this is kind of like your friend. So each browser has inspect. It has like this. It has this all these options basically. The first one is called elements. The elements are just your HTML. You're basically like CSS and HTML. So you can see how the website looks like. You guys have seen like people memes that said like you could hack NASA with HTML. So if you go to the NASA website, NASA, we could like hack right now NASA. So it says ignite your senses or whatever this is. We could right click and change that to whatever we want here. So this is basically what they mean by like hacking. So we could say, hi guys, whatever. And now we hacked NASA basically, right? But that doesn't mean anything because you could just refresh it and it's a local change. So basically that is the HTML. You could modify the page whatever the way you want, but it's local. So after you refresh it, it doesn't go anywhere. On the right side is the CSS. We talked about this when we were learning the HTML and CSS. The left side is the HTML. But today we're here for JavaScript. So JavaScript is the console. This console, ignore all these errors. The console is where JavaScript, runs basically. So we can run whatever we want here. So we could say const name is equal to Abdi, or we have to put quotation, right? And then save that. So now that name is saved into the memory of Java of the browser and the JavaScript. So now if we call name, it says Abdi. So it already knows, but it doesn't save in a server or anything. So if you refresh, that's already gone. So that's where JavaScript works. It works in the browser. So that's JavaScript right there. So if we go back, so JavaScript is the third major building blocks of a web page. So if you're learning web design or web development, is the third thing you learn. We learned HTML, we learned CSS, and then JavaScript. So we went through all this. So some of the things you need to understand about JavaScript. So let's actually open a quick code bin. We have a code bin for today's lecture here, but we're doing a quick review of the last time. So I want you guys to help me. How do we write a comment in JavaScript? Anyone want to volunteer? How do we write a comment? Like, how do we comment out? So let's say I write something like, this is a comment, right?
Is it
The
com
comment, you gotta like use the two the two lines, right?
two lines in front of it, right? So you put two
Yeah.
lines in, yeah. So you put two slashes in front of it, and now this code is commented out. Means like you could write something and then it will not execute this code. Um, so that's one way to write. The other way is right here. Let's go to comment. The other way is this. So you basically write slash and then star, and then you write multiple lines of comment. So just like this. So if you want to write, this is a multiple line comment. So if you want to do this, you have to either do like this, each line, or you could do the other way, which is basically a line or a slash and then a star, and then at the end you do the same thing, and then you do star and then that. So that will hide basically the comment. So multiple line. Okay. How do we write a variable in JavaScript? Variable. How do you write variable?
You say var.
Var. Okay, var. And then you give it the name, right? So let's say var age is equal to, and then you could say 20, right? So in JavaScript, you could leave out the semicolon at the end, or you could add it. It's optional. In other languages, you have to do that, right? So JavaScript is optional. What other way can I declare a variable? What other way can I write a variable? There's three ways to write variable.
I don't remember if it's the right word, but is it let?
Let, okay, cool. Yeah, let let's say food is equal to Angelo, right? What other way can we declare variable?
Is it a console.log?
Close. Console.log is basically if we want to show the code in the console, which is right here. So that's like other languages, it says print, but in JavaScript, it's console.log. But the other way is
Would
const.
constant work? Constant?
Const, yep,
Const?
const
Yeah.
is the other way. So this is basically another way to declare variable. Basically, variable is a container. So you put stuff in. So variable is a container of uh of something. So it could be anything. It could be like a number. It could be a string, and we'll learn all this what all this mean. So you could let's say school. Let's say um, University of Minnesota. Okay, right? So you could declare like that. So const, who can tell me why do we have three different ways to declare variable? What is the reason? We kind of touched on last time. I don't know if you guys remember. So var is actually is kind of outdated, right? So we're not using var anymore. So in your code, don't use var ever again. There's a reason for that. Var is called this is called global scope. It's kind of something that we'll learn later. Basically, it means like your variable can be accessed anywhere and it can be changed anywhere, right? So it's very like loose way of declaring. Let let is a better way. So let allows you to reassign the basically reassign the variable, right? Reassign. So what does that mean? Reassign means basically you could say food is equal to Malawa, right? Which is my favorite. Uh, and you could say that that means we changed the basically the information in the variable, right? We changed. So now it's fine. It will run. We could console log it. Console log is basically like print. So if we say food, then it should print out here. Sorry, let me just go back. Malawa, right? It printed out Malawa. So it kind of like deleted Anjero. So it's not there anymore, right? So that's not a good thing, right? That's not good. You don't want that. So the good thing about const is it doesn't do that. So if we say something like school, let's say something like new school, it will not let you do that. So it will show an error. So if we cancel log again, ignore all the things that's going on the right. It's automatically saving. So if we say school, it will give you an error, right? It will say assignment to constant variable, blah, blah. It's basically saying you cannot reassign or you cannot like delete or update basically what you already have. So this one, the const is used for like strict code. So if you want your code to be more strict and more rigid and like not easy to change, then you use the const. And use the const always unless you have to use the let. That's the rule basically. Use always const unless you have to use a let. And don't ever use var. Never use var. Okay, that's outdated, and if you use it in your code, it could be a problem. So that's variables. We're kind of going over quickly because we did this before. So let var. Okay, data types. So data types. Who can tell me what data types are? It says over there, but in your own words, what are JavaScript data types? Anyone? So as you guys saw here, we said like 20,
Isn't
and we
it?
said Angero.
Isn't
But
it like what's call it? They're used to specify like what kind of data, like the variables can code, right? Like the different variables you use.
yeah, so kind of. So it's basically telling us like what type of stuff we're storing in the variable. So now
Yeah,
we're
like
storing a
what
number
type of stuff
here.
in store.
Yep. So we're storing a number. So when you're storing a number, you don't put any you don't put quotation around it. So you can see here 20 is just 20. So if it's a number, that's how you know it's a number. In other languages, you have to say something here, something like a number here or something like that, or integer or something like that. But in JavaScript, you don't say anything. You just kind of declare it, and then it kind of already knows that this is a number because it doesn't have a quotation around it. This one, it knows that it's a, what is this one? Who can tell me? What is it called? In the data type right here. Which data type is it? There's all these data types. Which one is Angero? Sorry about that. So Angero, which one? What is it basically? So you could say it's a text, right? So you could use your own language. You could say it's a text. It's just a written text. So that's called a string, right? A string in JavaScript. Other languages call something else, but in JavaScript it's called strings, right? So strings are just basically just a quotation around it, and then that's, yeah, how you know it's a string. JavaScript doesn't let you know that. So there's other few ones. So we have a number and we have a string. We also have a Boolean, which is a true or false. We have undefined and null. Those are basically just when things are not defined, then you call them undefined or null. Okay. Those are data types. So these are called primitive data types. So if in interview, if they ask you what are JavaScript primitive data types, basically you say strings, numbers, booleans, undefined, and null. That's it. If you say that, you'll pass that question basically. And if they ask you what are strings, strings are just text. What are numbers? Numbers are positive and negative numbers, and then booleans, true and false, and then undefined and null are just uh, things that are not defined in the code, basically. So that is, any question about that, about data types? All right. We're not gonna do the math. JavaScript has math, a way to like add, subtract, do arithmetic, and you guys already know how to do math, but you could use JavaScript, you could use math with JavaScript. So you could add, subtract, uh, all that stuff, all the math things. Also, it has more things. It has something called, this is called a modular operator. Basically, it's just like in JavaScript, in math, it's called remainder, right? So if you want to get the remainder, then you use this assignment. This basically you say what is when you divide 21 by 5, what is the remainder? Then you got 1 because 25, 5 goes into 21, I mean, into 4 times, right? And then you got 1 back. Basically, it's like you get the remainder after it goes into, and then 6 goes into 21, I think 3 times, and then you get like 3 back, and this 21, as you can see. So you basically use this as this, and then you get the remainder. So if you're doing a math problem and you see like a way to get a remainder, that's how you get it. And then it has like a math methods. So math methods is basically like methods that allow you to like do math. So this thing, math.bow or BOW is basically this allows you it's an exponent. So in JavaScript in math you do exponent, right? So 2 to the power of 2 is 4. 3 to the power of 2 is 9. If you guys can open your camera and some of the students left, that would be great so I can see if you guys, you know, trying to pay attention or busy. But yeah, just there are a lot of math methods. So this one helps you find the round basically. So 6.5, if you round that, it's 7. So you guys already know math. So 6.5 is closer to the to the 7. This one is called floor. It's the opposite of this. It's basically runs down to the nearest number, right? So 6.45 is 6. Math ceiling is the opposite of math floor. It runs up. Actually, it runs, what is math ceiling? Yeah. It runs up this one. This one runs down, right? It doesn't matter if it's closer to the 7, basically, right? So even if it's 6.9, it will round down to 6, right? So that's kind of like the math methods that you could use. So these are pretty easy. You could just declare them anywhere. So you could just say here, you could say console log. So it's already built into the JavaScript, right? So you don't have to do anything. So you say math, it starts with a capital M dot floor. So let's say 8.8. That's supposed to go up to like 9, right? It doesn't go to 9, it goes to 8, which is weird. But yeah, if you say I think it's like a ceiling seal. Yeah, I think the spelling is wrong. Seal. Okay. So that will round down to 9, round up to 9, right? So even if you make it like 8.2, it will still say 9. So those are just a way to force that. But yeah, other than math, then there's the comparison, which we talked about last time. We're not going to go over it. It's just basically less than, greater than, all that stuff. There's a logical operator. Basically, it's like and. So this one is and, this one is or. So if you want to say something is this or that, you just use one of these. The control flow. I want to start with the control flow because I feel like this is really important, right? So in JavaScript, how to do a control flow. What is a control flow? Is basically how do you tell something is true or not, or how do you create condition, right? If this then that, if this then that. There's actually a website called If This Then That. It allows you to do different things, but the main thing is like a condition, right? If you want to create condition. So let's say we want to say something like, let's say we wouldn't do like age. In the assignment, I think there was something about the driver license or voting. So let's do something like, let's check if you can vote, right? Let's say, let's create a variable. See, I'm using constant now. Let's say Liban. Let's say Liban's age, right? Is equal. How old are you, Liban?
Oh, I'm 18.
18. Okay. So let's say you're 18, okay? Let's check if you can actually vote. So I mean, we already kind of know, but I'm just using programming to check that. So we say if Liban age is less than 18, then you open curly bracket. So these are called curly bracket. So here you say if this condition is true, if it becomes true, you write something here. So we say console log. Console log basically prints it here. I'm not sure why all these errors are coming up. So basically console log will print. So we'll say if you're under 18, you cannot vote, bro, right? And we'll say also, and then we'll say else. So else is basically just in English, it's like saying if this, then else that, right? Then we say here, go ahead and vote, right? So, so let's actually run. I don't know why it's saying both. Let me actually change this from auto save to let's make it let's save it ourselves. And behavior, let's get this there was something related to like save and run or something like that. But hopefully it shows after we run. So if it's greater than that, okay, let's see. Format, no. There was something about behavior. Okay, let's go with the auto save for now. Let's can't do anything about it. But now it's gonna run the code. I'm not sure what's wrong with it. Let's refresh. Okay, so it says go ahead and vote. What happened here? It's supposed to be yeah, I think it's correct, yeah. So if the age is 18, so he's exactly 18. He's not younger than 18. So it says go ahead and vote. So if we say something like 16, it's gonna print out. Still says go ahead and vote. So let's see. Let's actually use their example. Not really. Okay. So if we say the event is greater than 16, then we say you can vote, right? So let's say he's not greater than 16. So basically you're creating a condition and then you're saying if this is true, then run this. If this is not true, then run this basically. And then you could also add other things too. You could say here, instead of else, you could say else if, and then you could write another condition. You could say maybe you have another variable here, const in state. So if the person is in state or something, let's say false, right? And then we say here, if in state is true, so if you just leave the variable the way it is, then that means this is supposed to be true, right? Or you could just say if this is equal to true, right? You could say that too. But we could just leave it the way it is. And then the last one has to be always else, right? So the last one has to always be else. So you have if, and then you have else if, and then you have else. So the last one has to be else. You cannot have else in the middle. And you could add as many else ifs as you want, right? So you could check a bunch of stuff. It's in a state, this and that. Does it have, ID, blah, blah, right? All that stuff. So that's what you use an if statement for. So this is a control flow. So you're using basically the stuff we learned up here, which is comparison operators with the if statement. And then you're creating, this is basically what programming is in general. Some people even say like even AI is basically a lot of if statements. So it says if so-and-so says this, say that. If so-and-so says this, say that. So it's like millions of lines of if statement, which is not true. But yeah, any question about comparison, control flow or if statements, or how they work basically? So the statement, if it's true, if this is true, so we can write a comment here. If this is true, then run this, right? And then we're gonna say else run this. And then this one is if none of none above is true, run this, right? So that's kind of like how it works. Yeah. Okay, next. Next, we're gonna do loops. So we're gonna do this one. This one is like, I think, the most confusing one in for beginners, basically. Loops are fundamental to dry. Who can tell me what dry means in programming? Have you guys ever heard what dry? It's an acronym. Dry. Dry stands for do not repeat yourself, right? So basically, loops help you not repeat yourself. So you could do one time, and then you could do forever. So for example, your teacher or your mom, I remember back in the day, I don't think you could do that now. But back in the day, if you're in trouble, the teacher will ask you, write, "I am sorry," 10,000 times on the board or something like that, on on the dashboard or in the school board. Um, and then you just have to sit there, or they'll give you a book. I don't know if you guys remember that. You get a book, and then you just have to write, or a paper. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. 10,000, like 100 times, right? Not 10,000, 100 times, so that you get that down, right? Which is kind of weird. But in programming, you could do that in like 2 lines, and then just kind of like it writes 1,000 I'm sorry lines. But before we get to that, let me just explain quickly what loops are, so you guys understand. I'm just gonna draw something so you guys understand. So let's say programming looping is basically, let's say we're gonna create this is sorry, my drone is bad. This is a track, right? Running track, right? So we have running track here, and you enter here, right? This is where you enter, and then you could exit here if you want. So looping is basically you start somewhere. So this is the start, right? So the Olympics they had, sorry, I don't have something to write. I'm using my mouse. The Olympics they had a place to start. So everyone starts on one place, right? And then they run, 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 run. They do a couple of loops, and then they stop, right? So you run here. This is your track, and then you go around a couple of times, and then you stop. So the running is basically um, the start. The start, you start with 0, right? Start with 0. You have 0, whatever, 0 steps, right? Start with 0. And then by going around, you add in plus whatever. Like let's say steps. You add in steps. So you add in steps. Every time you go around, you add amount of steps. Yeah, go ahead, Rashid. You add in steps, right? And then you go around, you have like, let's say about like 200 steps or something, right? 200 steps by the end of it. And then you have to stop somewhere. So this is your stop right here. Stop. So in programming, looping is exactly the same. It has a start, which is like you could start any number. You could start from like let's say 5 steps. Maybe you're ahead of 5 steps or whatever. And then you start with 0, let's say, and then you increment. This is called increment. Increment. I can't spell it, but increment. Basically, you go one step ahead. Basically, you kind of add to the step, and then you keep going. You keep going. You have to have a stop. If you don't have a stop, what happens? Let's say the athlete just keeps going forever. What happens to the athlete? Right? So you run out of juice or whatever, you crash, right? So in programming, it's the same. If you don't have a stop, then your computer is gonna keep running that forever, unless you just close out everything. Sometimes what happens to like larger companies, even like Microsoft, the other companies, they have some loop like this, and then they just didn't have a stop, or the stop was wrong, and then the program crashes. If you ever see like a website crashing or software crashing, is because somebody forgot to add a stop. So let's write this in actual coding, right? Let's write this in actual coding. So looping are fundamental to dry programming, allows the developers to run chunk of code repeatedly understand basic loops and native to loop implementation JavaScript. Most software run on loops, evaluation expression over and over again until it either returns or what are you looking for or hits a certain number of loops. Actually, in AI, that's what it does too. In AI, they run a bunch of loops so that if the AI gets wrong and then goes back to the same start, and it's like, okay, let me just see if I get something wrong or something like that. So they use that too. So basically, okay, so this is basically the let's actually, before we write actual code, let's quickly write something called pseudocode. Loop pseudocode. Anybody know what pseudocode is? Pseudocode? No one? Pseudocode is basically like a fake code that helps you understand what's happening. So basically, in this pseudocode, we're gonna basically show you. So this is gonna be so we're gonna use something like for. For is basically what you start with. So in variables, you start with like a var or let or something, but in loops you start with for in JavaScript at least. And then you say start number. So let's say start number. So this is pseudocode. This is not how you write the code. I'm just writing something that looks like code, but it's not code. Start number. I think that's, and then we'll say repeat this amount, right? So we're repeating some amount. So when you write for in here in the bracket, you write where to start. Remember we said the starting of basically the track. So you tell it where to start, and then how many times you repeat. Like how long and how many times you want to repeat. Like you tell it exactly the number how many times you want to repeat, and then here is keep repeating. So you give it a number that allows it to keep repeating, and then after that, and here run this code, right? That's it. So this is how for loop looks like in pseudocode. Basically, you have a start, and then a number to start, how many times you want to repeat, because we said the track, every athlete has a number. So some long runners, like 5,000 running trucks or 5,000, whatever it's called, they have like these the Ethiopians and also the Somalis, they run a long time. So you do a bunch of like repeating. So that you have to have a number, like maybe you're repeating like 20 times, right? So everybody should know that. So how many times you want to repeat, you tell it here. And then here you put a thing that allows it to keep repeating. So that would be basically like the athlete basically running. So the steps the athlete is taking is basically this, keep repeating. So you keep telling the athlete, keep going, keep repeating. So this is pseudocode. So let's write the actual code first. So just keep in mind the pseudocode and the track we talked about. So actual code is like this. Say for, and then you basically mention where you want to start. So that will be a variable. So let, and then you say, you give it something. We usually say I is equal to 0, right? We usually say I is equal to 0. And then that is where you start. So we say that. So that's the start. That means we're starting with 0. And then you could put this any number you want. You say 20, that's what it's going to start. It's still going to start 20. And then how many times you want to repeat? So we're basically, let's see this example. What is it saying? So we're repeating I basically. And then we say I as long as, so this means as long as I is less than, you say less than 10. So as long as I is less than 10, keep going. And then how do you keep going? Do you jump steps? So let's say if you count in every other step, or if you count in every 2 steps, how do you want to count? Are you counting every step or every other step? To count that, you say I plus plus. So this means, this is in programming, in all the languages, this means increment. It means like keep going. like one after another. So say something like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and it will stop at 9 because I is less than 10. It doesn't say I is equal to 10, right? So we'll learn that too. So let's see here. And then we say console log. So it's gonna run this code. It's gonna say hello world. Hello world 9 times. So it's repeating 9 times hello world right here. Right? What happens if we don't add this? Or if we say something like if I is greater than 10, what happens? Anyone? I see a lot of people close their camera. Some people left, right? So this is what I was talking about, the infinite. This stops the infinite loop. It's called infinite loop. So if we say something like, and we don't want to say that because our browser could crash. If we say I is greater than 1, then there's nothing stopping. It's just going to keep going. I is greater than 10. That means like, okay, so we're going to go 11, 12, and then 100,000 million, right? There's actually a way to stop it. And like also JavaScript is kind of smart. It doesn't keep continuing after like 10,000. It will just kind of stop. And the browser are pretty smart too. So we don't want to do that, but we could say something like I is equal to or we could say that I is equal to or less than 10. So what does it do is it adds the 10, right? So it goes from 0 to 10. And let's actually count it. The way to count it, you could just cancel out the I, and that will count it. What did we get wrong here? Oh, we have to change this. We have to say less than or equal to, right? So it counted for us. It started from 0. Let's comment out this code here. It started with 0 and it went all the way to 10. And if we say just less than, it's going to go all the way to 9. So it goes all the way to 9, right? So if you want to include it, you have to say equal to. So this is kind of like how to do for loop, basically. You just run whatever you want here. So let's say your teacher told you like, say I'm sorry 100 times. You just say here 100 times. And then you write I'm sorry here. I'm sorry. Right? Boom. Your teacher doesn't even know. And you print it out and you're done. Right? So you have like hundreds of them here. Right? So this is for loop. You have to have a start. You have to have a way to basically where to stop. And then you have to have a way to like step through basically how to like go. So if we say 1 plus 2, this is basically saying 1 plus 1. It's I mean, I plus 1. Exactly the same. It's not going to change because that's what it's saying. If we say I plus 2, every other step. So that means like it's going to say something like, actually, let's test it out. Let's say 10 here and add here the I. The I. Okay. So let's see how that prints out. What's wrong with it? Print it out. Let's say I plus 1. That should print it out. I'm not sure why it's confusing. But if you say plus, it means 1. You could also say, 1 plus 1. So you could do every other 2 steps, every other 3 steps, you could do like that. But usually you just see I plus plus. That means just every step, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? It's not printing out. Oh, it's keep printing the 100 still. Okay, let's close that, open it again, or refresh it. Yeah, we did 100 and it's kind of slowing down their website. But yeah, I mean that's for loop. Any question about for loop so far? Any question? Okay, so for loop. We also have another one. This is what I talked about. It's called the incrementing operator. So it's basically just adding 1 plus 1. There's also another way to loop, which is while loop. So we had for loop, which is the one we just did, for loop, and then while loop. While loop is a little bit different, but it's kind of the same. And we'll check it out. My browser is crashing. I don't know what is going on with this. Any questions so far about any of the things we did? Okay. Console, open. Okay. All right. So I'm not sure what it's doing here, but let's do the increment. It didn't like that +2. Okay, I'll save it and then refresh. Okay, we're gonna do for loop, which is you will see, I mean while loop you will see sometimes, but mainly the thing is like you just move around the way you do the while loop, the for loop. So the while loop is basically start with a while, right? It's just the same as for, but instead of adding basically uh, conditions here, a lot of conditions, you add one condition. You say, okay, if this condition is true, just do this, right? While I is equal to true, just keep doing this. But you have to also add the basically you have to add the stopper inside. So right here is basically we add as long as you add it here actually. You say what you declare the variable and then you say while this is less than 10, keep going. And then the way to keep going is like just incrementing the same way we did the for loop. So let's see if I can do that. It's acting up. If it doesn't work, we can just close it. Close it. All right. So I'm just gonna do it here. We're gonna do the next lesson here, but let's do the while loop. So this would be the while loop. So the while loop is the difference is just basically you declare the variable first. You say let or const. I usually use const. Const I is equal to 0. This is the start. So the start of the track is outside of the while loop. And then you say while, right? Say while, and then you put here the condition while I is less than 10, then run this code basically. So you say console log run, right? But we also have to add, it will not work because we have to add the increment here. So we have to say I is plus equal plus what was it? 2, right? We could say 2 if we want here. So the while loop is kind of like already, what is it showing here? Okay. I'm not sure what's wrong with the code flipping. It's not supposed to run that. That's why I wanted to turn off the auto run. So I can write, and then after I write, it runs. Okay. So let's save it, refresh. We're having a hard time with this one. But yeah, it's the same idea. Basically, we're looping, we're basically adding we add in this, and then we're saying this is a condition. If it's less than 10, the count, then keep printing out, and then just keep incrementing by 2. That's what we're saying here. So keep adding 2, or you could say keep adding 1, right? All right. So while that is looping, any question about the while loop? It's the same idea. We just move things around, basically. Same idea as a for loop.
Yeah. Hi. Don't mean to disturb the lesson. I was just confused. I thought this was a camera on thing.
Yeah,
Is it?
I don't know what happened.
Oh, okay.
I remind everyone, but I feel like
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll take note. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, those who keep your camera on.
Any question about for loop and while loop? What they do and what they are for? We also have an issue here, so let's close that. Any question? Let's. I'm not sure what I did here, but let me open a new one. Okay. All right. That was the first lesson. So this was basically our first lecture. We didn't finish that part, the while loop, for loop, if condition, all that. But that was our first. The second one we're gonna do is a little more. We're gonna go into other three more topics. So week 5, right? So week 5, we're gonna do three things. We're gonna do functions, we're gonna do arrays, and we're gonna do objects. We're gonna understand what they do. These are basically the most important aspects of JavaScript. Functions, arrays, objects. If you don't understand any of them, you don't understand JavaScript. It's basically like the brain, the heart, and like the legs or something, or the eyes, right? Objects are basically like literally the most important part of JavaScript. So let's go over them and what they do. So our objective is to understand the JavaScript functions, why we use them, and we're able to write the syntax of the JavaScript function, write and call functions using arguments. You will understand what these are in a little bit. Arguments and parameters, use arrays to store and access data, use arrays properties and array methods, use objects to store data and access data, and then learn to create methods on objects and utilize this keyword. So there's a keyword called this. Okay, before we get into, let me ask you guys, what are functions? You can tell me what functions are. You learned other languages too. Every language has a function. What are functions? What do they do?
They structure the code.
Structure code. Okay, that's good answer. Okay. Anyone else want to try functions? Okay. Let me give you another example. I like giving examples because I feel like programming is very like conceptual, and it's like really hard to understand what is it talking about. So functions. Functions, let's just read quickly what it says here. Functions allow you, the developer, to repeat sections of code with a single line. Consider for a second, you want to program a robot to bake a cookies, right? A particular program because you have cookies all the time. Code without functions might include steps. So with the functions, without functions, you might include the steps of add. Basically, you have a robot and you want it to cook cookies for you, basically, right? So you want to add steps to the robot. You want to tell the robot, hey, I want you to do certain things for me and make cookies. So you're gonna add something like add flour, add eggs, add chocolate chips, preheat oven, and bake, right? You give all these steps. All these steps are part of function called bake cookies. So there's a function called bake cookies, and you just click it, and it just gets going, right? It starts doing the baking basically, and it just keeps doing. And this also brings back to us the dry. Basically, you don't want to repeat yourself. You want to write a function that does the same thing again and again. That's why in like factories and like assembly lines, they have the cars have exactly the same parts assembled the same way because they use functions, right? So this is not like a conceptual thing like in high school or something. They have like math concepts that don't apply to certain things. This applies to everyday things. Let me give you an example. Think about a vending machine, right? Vending machine. What do we do in vending machine? Just tell me the steps you guys do in vending machines. What are the steps? What do you do? Like just in general, like what do you do when you come to a vending machine? What is the first thing you do?
Put the money in the machine.
Put the money in the machine. So step one, money, right? What is the other step? What is the next step you do in the vending machine? You just put the money and you just leave.
You select the product you want, whatever.
Select something. Yep. Select. Yep. Select. Right. What is the next step? After you select, what happens? It gives you the item, right?
Yeah, it gives you that in advance.
Yeah. Get item, right? Whatever you're trying to get item. This is exactly what we did in the bacon, right? This is part of function, this is part of function, and this is part of function. So basically, this is called input in programming. Input, you put in the money in. What is this one called? The last one? If we say this one is input, what is this one? The last one? Output, right? You don't know what happens inside the vending machine. How does he know? How does he know you put $1, $5, $2? How does he know that? How does he know if you select item? How does he know it's that item, but not other items? How does he know that? All that is other functions, right? So the first function is input money. The second function is get the item. That's called input and output. And that's all functions do. They do input, you input something, and output something. So there's a lot of ways to define it, but that's basically the gist of it, right? Functions are a code that you write and it does something for you, basically. So in JavaScript, this is how you write a function, right? So in JavaScript, so if we say here function, let me get my notes back. In JavaScript, this is a basic function. You start with the keyword function. Every time we do something in JavaScript, there's a keyword. There's a way to like do it, right? Let me see if I can change the behavior here. Auto save. Okay. Hopefully there was a way to like save it, but I'll save it instead of auto save. I'll save it, and then it will run the code after that. Okay, so in every we said for loop, we said variable. Everything has a keyword. For function, the keyword is in JavaScript is function. Other languages, maybe you learned Python, it will be like def or something like that. It will say something like def. Other languages have another word, but mainly JavaScript is function. So we're gonna write some function that says hello, say hello. And then inside it, we're gonna console log hello world, right? I don't know why it keeps running here. It's not supposed to run that. We run that. Okay. So basically the name of the function is say hello. So if somebody asks you what is the name of this function, you say hello, say hello is the name of the function. And then you see here it has these parentheses. These parentheses are empty right now, but later we're gonna put something in there, right? And then you open the curly bracket and you close the curly bracket. Now we can't run this function will not work. Like there's nothing like if we say save, nothing prints out. What do you guys think we should do to run it? How do we run the function? Any ideas? So to run the function, we call the function. So this is called calling the function, or it has another word. We say hello, hello, well, hello. We call the name of the function. This is called, if you ask in interview, it's called invoking function or invoking function. So you call in the function basically. So you just write the name of the function and then you write the parentheses with it. If you don't write the parentheses with it, what happens is it's just going to show the code of the function. Let's say here, is it going to run? It doesn't even run here. But in other places, it's just going to show the code, this code. It's not going to show you what's inside it. Or it's going to say this is a function, right? So that's how you run a function, or that's how you invoke a function. Any question about that? Yeah. Okay. So that's a basic way of writing function. This is the most basic function you could ever write. It's say hello and then just basically console log it. So let's comment it out. So we're commenting it out so that it doesn't run later. Okay. Functions are actually written in different ways, right? So they're not only written in this way. There's three ways to write. The other way it's called no, actually that's one way to write. But let's actually add something in here in the parentheses, these parentheses. Let's do that. So this is called function. If you ask in interview, it's called function declaration. You basically write in a function declaration. I think that's it, right? So we say function, and then let's say something like add. So we're adding numbers and stuff, right? Before we do that, let's write here. Let's open it. So inside the add, we want to add a couple of things. We want to add numbers. So if you want to add numbers, we give the number a name, whatever name. This could be anything. So we say something like num1 and num2, right? So these are basically what we want to add. They don't exist yet, right? These are basically, so these are called parameters. So I'm just giving you these words because they're gonna come up in an interview if you ever wanna interview with this. Parameters. So they're gonna ask you what are the parameters of the function. So if they're gonna ask you, these are the parameters of the function. Basically, it's like if you leave one and then call two parameters later, it's not gonna work. We'll see that. And then we'll say return. So this is another keyword, return. It's not part of like our language. It's part of JavaScript. Return, we're returning the result of the function. So we say num1 plus num2. Boom, that's it. Right? So this function, basically, its job is to add two numbers. Whatever the numbers are, I don't care, 100, 20,000. Just give me two numbers, I'm gonna add them. That's it. That's all it does, right? So how do we call this? We say console log. Console log basically because we want to see it here. We say console log, and then we call the name of the function. We say add, and then we give it two numbers. If we don't give two numbers, it's going to give us this, none, right? It's going to say that. If we give one number, so let's say 2, it's going to give us error probably or none. So it's going to say, we don't know what that is. We have to give it two numbers. After we give two numbers, it's going to give us the result of the two numbers, right? So it adds those two numbers, right? Any question about that? How that worked? It might look magic, but it's actually just coding, right? We're just adding two numbers. This is really like a basic math, but it could get more complicated, more convoluted. But we're trying to keep it simple so you guys understand. And this is actually called, these two numbers, they have a name. They're called arguments in programming. In other languages too, they're called arguments, right? So if interview, somebody asks you what are the arguments of the function, then you have to say like numbers or something, whatever you send in the function. So we're basically sending these numbers to this function, right? Any question? All right. So that is how you add parameters and arguments. So there are other ways to write function. So there's two more ways to write function. So one way is just basically you start with the function and then you add blah, blah, all that, right? There's easier ways. So if we want to simplify it, if we want to make it like a little bit easier, there's other ways. But another way is there's something called anonymous function. Anonymous function basically is written in a, like, you just move things around basically. So instead of, let's say, the add, we could just say const. We could put the function in a variable. So we could just say add. We take the whole function that we wrote here, and then it's equal to function. And then we just say num1, num2, and then open it, and then say return num1 plus num2. So what did we do here? You can tell me. What did we do? What did we move around here? Like why is it a little bit different? Anyone? So this one is the one we just learned, and this one is the one we just wrote. What is the difference? What are you observing? What do you see?
That there's parameters?
Parameters. This one also has the parameters, right? Too. But what is the
Yeah.
difference between this function, which we can actually open it, and this function? They both do exactly the same thing. Visually, what do you see the difference is?
You have function instead of constant? Or, yeah.
Yep. So this one has function, starts with function, and this one starts with constant, right? Visually, like just looking at it, right? So this one, basically, all we're doing is we're just taking this whole function and we're putting it in a variable. That's it. That's all we're doing. So the result is going to be in that variable. So whatever this function does, it's going to be in here. So this is basically the function name, right? So these are called actually, they have two different names, but these are called function expressions. Expressions, if I can spell. Function expressions, or they're called anonymous function. Anonymous function. Who can tell me why are they called anonymous function? Why are they anonymous? That's because this part doesn't have a name, right? So it just starts with function and just gives the parameters and all that, and it doesn't have, the name. So just because of this, there it's called anonymous. Really, it doesn't matter, but that's what they called. Okay, so this is exactly similar to the other one. And now if we just say console log and do the same thing, it should print the same result. So if we say 4 and 5, it should print out a number. What is this? Okay, we have two functions that have same name. So 9. So 4 plus 5, 9. So that's just basically the same result. There's another way to write a function. So there's three ways, as I said. So the last one is actually the one that you should know how to write. Go ahead.
So right now I'm at the library and it's closing right now.
Okay.
Is it fine if I like join back in like 5 to 6 minutes?
Okay. Yeah, sure. No problem.
Okay.
Okay. So so the last one is the most important one, right? So these are basically the old way of writing the function. The last one is the new way of writing, and you will see this everywhere, basically. So just pay attention to the last one. Of course, you should know how to take the first one, and convert it to the last one, basically. So the last one is called arrow function. Arrow function, and you'll see why it's called arrow function. Sometimes it's also called fat arrow. I don't know why it's called that, but you'll see somewhere, right? But the main name is the arrow function right now. So what is the arrow function? We're basically taking the function we have here, which we can copy, this one, and we're just moving things around, right? So let's see. So let's see if we want to convert this to an arrow function. What do we do? What we do is we start with a variable, right? Just like this one we did before. We start with a variable. So we say add, constant add. Next, we get rid of the function word. We don't want the function. We already know this is a function, so we get rid of it. And then we say just empty parentheses. So we don't even want we move the add here. So this is the name of the function, and we get rid of this. So now we have this. So let's add the num1 here and num2, right? So we have num1, num2. Now we just create an arrow. So this is why it's called an arrow function. We add an arrow, and then we can open the function. So this is one way to write it, right? And you can say return num1 plus num2, right? It's basically what we just did. So what we did now is we just get rid of the function. We're kind of like making it very small and getting rid of everything, right? So we get rid of the function, but we could get rid of other things too. So let's say, so this is basically one way, but the other way would be getting rid of also these parentheses. Why do we need these parentheses? And also let's actually get rid of the return too. Because like the function is supposed to return that. Like we don't have to say return, like it's returning anyways. So we don't have to like tell the program, or you have to return this. It already knows that it's returning this, so it's implied basically. And we get rid of these curly brackets because what is the point of them, right? So we just write another one. Say add is equal to num1, num2, still the arrow, and now we say num1 plus num2. Isn't that cleaner? That's a lot cleaner than what we had all these functions, all that, right? So you arrow function, you could write it either this way or this way. And it returns exactly the same thing. Any question about that? How to convert a function, which would be part of the assignment, by the way. Part of the assignment is to take a function like this and convert it to an arrow function. Either this one or this one. There are times that you will need the curly bracket. So let's say if you're saying something like console log. So if you're doing console log here, you need the arrow, you need the curly bracket. If you're just saying return, you don't need the curly bracket. That's it. That's the difference. Or you want to like write more here, like you want to like write if statement here. So if you say if blah 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 all that, then you still need the curly bracket. But if it's just the two numbers or two things, or you return a name or something, then you don't need all that. Any question? Okay, cool. Okay, we're gonna learn one concept in JavaScript that other coding languages don't have. So this concept, sorry, I'm giving you a ton of information, but you're gonna need this in the assignment. This concept is called hoisting. Hoisting, if I can spell. Who can tell me, who can guess what hoisting is? Have you ever heard hoisting in programming? Do you know what it is? Can you guess? Anyone? What does it do? Hoisting. Anyone? So in JavaScript, it's only in JavaScript, by the way. It's not in other languages, which is very strange. Hoisting basically means, it's actually, let me just not butcher it. It's probably somewhere in here. Hoisting, right here. So declaration, JavaScript utilizes two-phase compiler when executing lines. So the way JavaScript works is, let's say it wants to like check if there's something in here. What it does is we learned about the JavaScript V8 engine. What is the V8 engine? Anyone remember what we talked about? V8 engine. It's not a car engine. So V8 engine is a software created by Google that runs in the browser. So it's in Chrome. Also, it's in other browsers too. It basically runs JavaScript, right? It's a compiler basically. So it takes the JavaScript code and it runs that code, right? So the V8 engine basically, every time you execute this something in here, if you say console log here, it goes at the top of the file and it reads the whole file, and then after that it console logs, or it reads that executes. Hoisting is basically let's actually go here. This means that anytime you run JavaScript in a browser, the browser will take two passes over our code. It will basically run two times, right? The first pass builds up references to all our code. The first pass, or the first time it goes over, it basically stores everything that you have. Basically, it knows the whole code in the file. Declaring variables and functions and the likes, right? The second pass applies values to the references that were found. That's actually running the code. So it does two runs. So in the interview, if somebody asks you what is hoisting, it's basically JavaScript running two times and checking the code. So that's what basically, so what hoisting is basically checking, or not checking, but moving function, what did we say at the top? Function invoking to the top. So hoisting is basically, in English, it means just you take something and you hoist, right? like hoisting. You just you take something and you pull it up. Like when somebody's going on a horse, you hoist the person. You just take the person and put it on the horse. So that's what it means in English, basically. So it's the same idea. It takes the function and it pushes it to the top here, right? So let's say we say something like console log. We say something like add, which keep doing the same thing, 3, 5. So we don't have any function that is actually working. So now it's going to give us an error because it's going to say add doesn't exist. That function does exist. What we could do is we could declare the function after. So we could say something like function add num1, num2, and then return num1 plus num2. JavaScript knows now that there's actually a function somewhere. So now this basically already knows there's a function at the bottom. So that's what hoisting is. Basically, it knows, it doesn't matter where you put the invocation or declaration. It knows if it checks the file, it's going to find that function anywhere that file is. Even if it's all the way at the bottom, and there's other stuff that's blocking it, it's going to be like, boom, that function exists. I'm going to run it. So other languages don't have this. You have to actually just put this at the bottom so that the program can like run and then checks and says, okay, I already have a function called add, so let me just run that, right? But JavaScript has something called hoisting. All right, keep that in mind. Any question about that? The students are, I think Rose is still here, but some students left. Only one student gave excuse. Any question? All right. So that's one concept is good to know. So we're done with functions. Basically, that's what functions do. That's it. I really want us to take a break, but we are running out of time. We only have like 25 minutes to cover two main subjects, which is array and objects. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let's actually go over them. I'm gonna simplify it. So let's go over arrays. What are arrays? So let's read arrays basically. So we did the function arrays. Arrays allow us to group and store together. Usually this is data is related, but this is not required, blah, blah. So basically what it's saying is, remember we said in variable. So when we say var, we say constant, but in, let's say name here, we store here one thing. We say Abdi, right? We can't store other student names, right? Why? Why can't we not store other things in here? So let's say we have Muhammad. How do we store Muhammad? We could say comma and then Muhammad, but that will all come in like one chunk. It would be like one variable, and it would be really hard to like separate that, right? So we have a new thing that will help us with that called variable. So we could say var or const. Let's say const. Let's say, what did we do here? Let's say const, right? So we say instead of name, we could say names. Sorry about the really bad handwriting. We say names, and we say we're storing the names in variable. To store something in variable, you just open a square bracket, and you close it with square bracket. And then inside here, you could put whatever you want. You could put numbers, you could put strings, you could put true or false, you could put other things too. You could also put like functions in there too if you want. But mostly you put like numbers and strings. So let's say we say something like here, we put quotation, we say Abdi, and then comma, right? And then Muhammad, I'm just gonna say Mo. And you could add as many as you want, right? You could just say comma, comma, add as many as you want. So this is cool now. So let's write that, actually. So we say const, and we're actually not going to do the names. We're going to do, let's actually do a couple of, before we do this, let me just write a couple of things about arrays. So you guys should know about that. So let's say arrays hold. So just this is for your notes, right? Just hold money values under single name, right? So this is just a comment, and you could keep this. You can access, and we'll learn this, the values. This is trying to come in. You can access the values by referring to the index. The index. We're gonna learn this index thing. It's really important. Index number. Another thing about arrays is the order. The order of items matter. The order matters. So if you put one in the front and one in the back, you could mess up things, and we'll learn what that is. And then the last thing about arrays is array index starts with. Who can tell me? Anyone remember about arrays in other languages or something? What do array index start? What number do they start at? And this is actually a meme too. there's a meme about it. So array index numbers start with 0. Right? There's a meme about that too. So if you say array 0 index meme, there's a meme about it. Where is it? Yeah. There's a meme about that. It says, does your dog bite? No, but it can hurt you in other ways. Arrays index start at 1. That's basically how it's hurting you as a programmer. It's like, arrays don't start at 1, they start at 0. So basically they're offset. So it starts at 0. And we'll learn what the index are and all that stuff in a minute. So that's kind of like what you need to know about arrays in general. So let's write arrays. So let's write const, let's say something like fruits, and then we're gonna write some fruits. So let's write mango. It doesn't matter, you could write anything here. Apple. Basically, I'm choosing like one thing. You could store here whatever you want. It could be like food, and it could be like fruits and other things and all that. But one thing you cannot do is you cannot nest arrays. I mean, you could, but it's not a good practice to like put another array here or another array inside the array, and it just that will mess up some stuff. It's really hard to access that too. So let's add one more or two more, banana, and then let's say grapes. Right. Okay, close the array. So that's our array. That's how you write array in basically in JavaScript. Other languages too. So we want to write, what we want to write is we want to write index. So basically in JavaScript, arrays have, each one has an index. Index is just a number that's automatically assigned to whatever's in here, right? So what is the first one? What does it start with? What do indexes start? What number do indexes start? Or indices, I don't know what they call. We just learned it. It actually literally says right there. What do they start at? Anyone? You guys have to try to respond, please. What do arrays indexes start at?
0.
0. Easy as that. 0, 1. Forget about that dot. Just it's adding by itself. And 3, right? So that's the index. So this is commented out because it's hidden basically. The indexes are hidden. You don't see them, but this is how arrays work. Okay, so how do we access one of them? So how do we print out mango? Anyone can help me with that? They cancel log. How do we print out? Let's print out all of them first. Fruits. Boom, right there. Print it out. How do we print out one of them. Think about it. Let's print out mango. How do we do that? Any idea? So we have indexes, right? So we use this index as a number. So we're just gonna give this fruit a number and say, okay, print out that number. So we're just gonna say, we're gonna put a parenthesis here. We're gonna say 0, or I mean square brackets, mango right there, right? So you basically access any of them by just putting a square bracket behind the name and then giving the index, right? So that's cool, but we also want to know, let's say we want to know how many. So this is basically, I'm just gonna write this for your notes, how to access an item, right? So you could go back to this for the assignment. So this one, we want to know how long is the array. So we want to know how long is, or how many, let's say how many, that's better. How many items are in the array. I mean, you could count, you could see it and count it, but let's say you're working with a database and it returns a lot. It returns like 9,925 items. And then your boss came to you, you're working, and they tell you how many items are in the database. How do you access that? And then the database is in array, which is actually a real thing. Databases return things in arrays. So the way to do that is you just, let's cancel log for now. You grab the name, fruits, right? And then you add a method. So these are called methods. So you say length. Length returns how many items are in the array, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Where do we find these methods? You could find in the documentation. So if we say JavaScript length method, we say that, we could go to W3 Schools, which is a good documentation, but the basically the documentation for JavaScript is JavaScript was created by a organization called Mozilla Firefox, or Mozilla organization. It's basically the ones that created the Mozilla Firefox browser or whatever. So they have the documentation. They have everything about it and all that. So this is the website where you check. So basically, let's say array, let's add here array. There's different ways to check length, array length. So it's right here. So if you want to find other methods, they're right here, all of them. There's like, if we go down, you'll see other ones. Or W3 Schools is a little bit easier to see it. So the length right here. So you could check the length. There's a bunch of other things here. There's push, there's pop, there's slice, shift, all this. We're gonna try some of these, but these are all really, really important to know, not all of them, but like to know a lot of them, right? And in programming, you're just gonna keep practicing this. You're just gonna keep trying different methods. These are called methods. And then you're just gonna keep like, okay, I need this, I need to do this. Then you find something that does that for you, and you just grab that and use that. So so the length is one of them, and it tells you the length of that. We want to get the last one. We want to get grapes. How do we do that? Anyone can try?
Would it just be console log fruits 3?
Okay, you could do that. That's definitely one way to do it. Fruits, fruits, and then 3, right? It prints out grapes. Okay, great. That's one way to do it. But in programming, you're thinking in a bigger picture. What did we say earlier about database and stuff? So you want to think in the bigger picture. Let's say you have million items, and also you don't know their index and none of that. There's a way to return this without knowing the number of items and all that. You could count backwards in JavaScript. So these indexes can count backwards. So the way to count backwards is this one is 1. Backwards, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, and keep it going. So if you want to get the last one, the way to do it is you say fruits, and then inside here, you mention the length of the fruit. So you say fruits dot length, and then you say -1. When you say -1, you're basically telling the program, give me the last one, right? -1 is the last one. If you say -2, what happens? What do we get if we say -2?
Second to last one.
Second to last one. Easy. Banana, it's printed out. So we're thinking in a bigger picture in programming. We're not thinking about like, okay, you're gonna have 4 items. You're gonna have a information that you don't even know where it came from, and then you have to sift through it, use arrays and methods and all this. So we're thinking in a bigger picture. So to return the last one, second to the last one, you could do that. There's other ways to do it. We could use for loop that we learned to loop through this and figure something out, right? But we're just keeping it simple now. Let's comment this out. And then another one would be so these are just basically other things to do with array. So add new item. We want to add new item to array. How do we do that? We have this array. We want to add a new one, right? So one way to do it is you Google it. You say how to add item to array in JavaScript. I'm teaching you guys how programmers work, like professional programmers. Even if it's simple, they just Google it, right? And then you read, you just have to read a lot, right? So there's a method called push that we saw earlier. Add new item to the array. That sounds interesting. Okay, maybe we should try that. But we want to know, yeah. So that's one way to do it. Push. We could try push. Let's try it. So push add item to an array. That's easier one. So let's do that. We're kind of missing this, so let's copy this. Comment it out. Okay, we're gonna add new one. So we say console log. Let's say fruits dot push. And then you add what do you want to add, basically, right here. Push, and then you say, let's add kiwi. I'm not sure if that's fruit. Okay, so now, actually, we shouldn't say console log here because we're console logging the method. So we added a kiwi. Now there's nothing really, like there's nothing, it's not printing. So we're gonna print the fruits, the whole. So we want to see if it added kiwi. That's what we want to see. Fruits. Let's see. Boom, kiwi right there. Right. Push adds it where at the end. So we want to know how to add other ways, how to remove them and all that stuff, right? So let's comment it out or get rid of that. Let's add item at the beginning. How do we do that? What did I just tell you guys? How do professional developers do when they want to do something? What do they do? Like, I don't know how to add something at the beginning of JavaScript array. What is my first step? Google it, right? We Google it, basically. So you say how to add item at the end of JavaScript array. You have to add JavaScript because there are other languages too. And also Google gave us something here. I don't know what this is. I don't think that's right. Let's go here. We said push, but push does not add item at the beginning. It adds at the end. I mean, it just adds at the end, right? So that doesn't work. So we need to try other things, right? So there's a method, without boring you guys, there's a method called unshift. So the way you add it is you say fruits unshift. There's also shift, which adds at the end. Unshift, and then we add something. Let's say blueberry. So this adds it where? At the beginning, right? So let's console log fruits. So let's see what it gives us. Okay, so we have blueberry and we have a kiwi at the end. So now what happened to the index? Because we have index here, but we have like all these items that were added. What do you think happened to the index? Anyone? What do you think happened? Like, does it add more indexes? Does it say -1 or something? What does it do? Any idea? So in
Was-
JavaScript, it just kind of like replaces so it never changes the 0, right? So it's still gonna say 0, 1, 2. Do you want to say something? Sorry.
No,
Anyone
I
want to
was
say?
gonna ask the question. I didn't
Yeah.
hear it.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you what was the question. I didn't hear it,
Yeah,
but
yeah. So the question was basically like, what happened to the index? Because we added blueberry and kiwi and all that. So basically now blueberry is 0, and then kiwi is like whatever 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Kiwi is 5. Um, that's what it is, right? Okay. So we added at the beginning. We could add at the end. You could just use the push. There's other ones too. There's unshift, there's shift. So what do is you just look for the method that you want. So shift removes the first element of the array, right? So if you say shift, it just removes banana, let's say. There's also other ones too. Yeah, there's many ways to add things, and that's basically arrays. Any question about arrays? What do you do? All right. We have one more thing, but before that, let's take 5-minute break. Don't leave. I see somebody is at the gym or something, but yeah, I'll take 5 minutes and then I'll come back, and then we're gonna finish the object, which is the most important part of the JavaScript, basically, right? So let's take 5-minute break. All right, we're back. We're back. Let's get back to it. By the way, guys, I also watch basketball. I heard you guys were talking about basketball the other day, and you guys were thinking this Unk doesn't know anything about basketball. But I do watch basketball sometimes. I don't play at all. But I used to play when I was in high school a little bit, back in the day. But yeah, I do watch basketball. I would say, I don't want to trigger anyone, but I'm a LeBron fan. That's all I'm gonna say. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, LeBron fan. I literally just started watching basketball, and then the first person I saw was LeBron back in 2000. I think it was like 2010. That's when I started watching, like, seriously. Yeah, and I just saw LeBron dominated, and I was like, you know what? It looks cool. But I did do my due diligence, and I watched MJ. And back in the day, I did actually like download some, games back in the day. But then I'm like, cool, MJ was great, but like, I mean, he's more than great in basketball. But I'm saying, like, people were not as skilled, players were not as skilled at that time. So he was dominating guys who were not like super skilled, like today. You can't dominate Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant and those guys. Um, So I don't know. I mean, it just
Is anyone triggered by that statement? Oh, okay. I guess I'm the only one that doesn't watch basketball, so I have no idea. But
Yeah, yeah. And actually, it would be cool if you guys built something about basketball at the end. Like maybe you guys could build something like we could grab basketball stats and stuff. You could build for your favorite player. I like Russell Westbrook. I don't know. That also can trigger some people, but he's one of my favorite players. Yeah, I
oh yeah,
know.
you got some thumbs down.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What about Jokic, the Joker? Anyone? Okay. I don't like him because he's playing against LeBron and he's been in Lakers forever. I just don't like him, but I see how great he is. That's all. Okay, let's get back to it. Um, the objects, because we don't have a lot of time. We have to finish this in like 10, 15 minutes, right? But objects are literally the core, the heart of JavaScript, right? Objects are everything. And where do objects came from? I don't know if you guys ever heard there's something called like object oriented, OOP, and functional oriented programming, right? In programming, it's split into two. Functional programming paradigm and then object-oriented programming. What does that even mean? What is object-oriented programming? So let's do a little bit of like just examples of something. So when you hear object-oriented programming, it means like let's say we want to like talk about a house. Like let's say we want to like define a house. You write in an application that for constructors and people who build houses and stuff, and you want to define a house. Like what are the parts of a house? We have a house here. Sorry about the drawing, it's horrible. Um, we have a house here, we have a window here, whatever. Sorry about that. That was completely unacceptable. But yeah, I'm using my mouse. I don't have my drawing device or iPad. But yeah, just you have a house, you have a window here, whatever, nice house. And chimney, of course. So now, how do you define a house in programming? You want to define the color, you want to define the doors, you want to define different parameters of the house, different things of the house. So we say something like, we say window, we're just gonna say when, door, we say something like brown, color of the house, right? So these are all basically what the house is, what the house, the parts of the house. So these are basically, we're gonna say this is so we're gonna say something like this is a color. So the color of the house is it's like CSS. It's like brown, right? And then does the house have a door? Yes. Does it have a window? Yes. All that stuff. So these are called objects. So this, if you combine all this and you define everything about it, it's called object, JavaScript, or any other language. It's literally just an object. So object could be anything. It could be a car, and then car has like multiple things. It has like windows. It can drive. It can do all these things. House, you can live in it. You can turn on the lights, all that stuff. All that is part of the house. So everything in the house, after you break it down in coding, and then you put it into like a something, let's say curly bracket here. You put everything about the house in that curly bracket. That's object, and that is object-oriented programming. You're basically going off, you're basically defining things in an object way. If you want to define it in like programming in a function way, which is the opposite of object-oriented programming, you basically say, okay, the house has a door. What does a door do? It opens and it closes. Then you define a function about that. Say function that opens. So you say open, and the functions that closes. You say function that turns on the light, and then all that stuff. Of course, you cannot define like door, all that. That's just variables. You can define in variables and put it in the function, and then the function basically defines what the house does. Like you can turn on the light, you can turn it off, you can open door, you can close it. Those are like actions that happen. So functional programming is more of action. Object-oriented programming is more of like the items of the parts of the programming, right? So that's what object-oriented programming is. In JavaScript, functions are also actually objects. Underneath functions, each function is just an object. In JavaScript, arrays, which we just learned, arrays are objects. If you actually go under the hood, basically like how it's built on top of objects. All right, so objects are the heart of JavaScript language. And this is like, you really have to know objects to take advantage of JavaScript. Otherwise, you don't even know JavaScript. Objects allow us to store lots of different data about single thing. So objects allow us to store, just like we said, the house is a single thing. We could store a bunch of information about that house. It could be a student. So let's say you're a student. In the school software, the school database, you are an object, right? In the program, in the software, in the school, you are an object. You have a name, you have like a color, you have an address, you have like all this, you have classes. Classes could be array, so you could put array inside an object. So basically every program is the definition. If you want to define something, you use an object. So how do we write object? So let's actually do that. Before we write objects, let's define a couple of things about objects, because we have a couple of things that we need to know about objects. The things we just said mainly. It allows, so these are notes for you. It allows you to store data about one object. Let's clear this. Another thing would be you can use instead of let's say key value pair or key value pair to store data. So this, I'll give just an example. So I'll say IE, this would be something like name. This would be like Abdi, right? That's a key pair value, basically like CSS. So you say the name and then the value of it. To store data. I mean, it's not you can, you have to all the time. That's how it works. Order does not matter. Doesn't matter. So like we said, the arrays, things have to be in a certain order. Objects don't have index. They don't have index. So things could just be all over the place and it doesn't matter. And here's another one. This would be like an interview question or something. Everything in JavaScript is objects. All right, this would be an interview question. They will say, what part of JavaScript is an object? What do objects do? These are like real questions in interviews. Except there's a exception. Except primitive data types. What are primitive data types, by the way? Like a quick quiz, because we did this today. Primitive data types. We talked about at the beginning. I know it's like the end of the day. Primitive data types are basically like strings, numbers, right? Numbers, true or false, and undefined. Undefined null. These are primitive data types. So just say IE here. Okay, so these are kind of like the things you write in a note, and then like you cannot remember it, what objects do, what they are, what they do, things like that. So it's kind of like a quiz thing that you should remember. In the future, I would say something like, does order matter? And you should say, no, it doesn't matter. And then I would say, are functions actually objects? And you should say, yeah, functions are objects. What about arrays? You should say yes. And then I say, what about strings? And then you should say no, because there's exception. So these are kind of like really, really important stuff that you will be asked in the future in interviews and stuff. Okay, so let's give an example of how objects actually do look like. So objects start with a variable, you say const, and then you declare whatever you want to declare, students or student, let's say. So we want to define one student first, right? And then curly bracket. The main thing about objects in JavaScript is the curly bracket. That's how you know. Arrays. What do we use for arrays instead of curly brackets? This is curly bracket. What about arrays? What are they? How do you define array? It's right here, right? If you go back to the note, you guys should know that arrays are square brackets right here, right? Should write somewhere in there, but square brackets, or you could say straight brackets or whatever. They have different names. Yeah. So straight brackets or square brackets. This one is a curly bracket. So always when you define an object, it's curly bracket. So we don't have a lot of time, so let's keep going. So what we want to define is student information. So this student name has a name. Name is, let's say, Ahmed. And then you say comma. So this is the difference between the array and object. You say comma, and then you define something else about this student. What else do we know about this student? So let's say location, Minneapolis. As you can see, I'm putting quotation around this. The basically the string. It could be single quotation or that. But the name, this is basically the, what is it called? The key. This is called the key. So this is the key, and this is a value. We said here key value pair. So you pair in these two, and this is a key, and this is a value. And that would be an interview question too. What do you call this? And they will ask you that. You should say this is a key and this is a value. Okay. And you could add a bunch of stuff about the student age, right? So let's say 18, comma. Yeah, don't forget that comma. School, let's say for simplicity, let's say I know some of you don't go to UFM, and you could find other things about the student, right? So now that's cool, but how do we get information about this student? We could print it out. We could just say console log student, and that will print out the whole student information right here, right? But we want to select, let's say, the age. There's different ways to do it. Select item, let's say. If you want to select the age, let's say, you could say console log. And also this is called, it has a name called dot notation. I don't know if you guys heard this in math or something. Dot notation, basically you just use dot. That's what it's saying, basically. Just go in here, you say student dot, and then age. You just grab the name from here, and then right there, right? Let me pause. Any question? so far what I just wrote? Anyone confused about what I just wrote? Because I'm going a little bit faster than usual. The next thing would be another way to select would be this is not like usual. You don't select this as usual. It's called bracket notation. Right? I'm giving you all these terms because they're part of the whole thing. Like you should know what when somebody says select in bracket notation and for object, when you use object select using bracket notation, you should know what this is. This is another way. It's not the most used way, but it's a way. So you say student and then you say bracket and then you say age, right? That's also can print out 18, right? There's quotation there. You can select any of the items, name, age, location, all that. Okay. Another thing you could do is in here, you could add whatever you want. It doesn't have to be like a string. It could be array. So you could say something like classes. So the classes the student takes, we could say something like math 101, English 102, whatever. And you could add other things too, right? So that basically is an array, right? Another thing you could do is you could put a function in here. So this is actually called the method. Inside when the function is inside an object, it's called the method. So just keep that in mind. How do we do that? So what do we do is we're gonna give it a name, right? So let's give it a name. Let's call it profile. I'm sorry, it's taking a lot longer than I expected. So you give it a name, you give it a key, and then you just write the function. You just say function, right? It's inside. You just do the same thing as we did before, and you can write whatever here you want. So you could say whatever. Hi, my name is, and then you could just connect something here. Or there's other ways to do it. Just say, you could say plus, not dot. That's another language. You could say name. But now we have to like select the profile. If we go here and we want to select the profile, you just say dot profile, but you have to make it a function. So you have to give it the invocation, right? So it says, hi, my name is, oh, okay. It says here name, but we have to say this dot name. And this is another subject. Maybe we could cover on the next lesson, but we'll see how that goes. So this is called this, and this is really important part of JavaScript. This is actually just referring to the object, the student, right? So it says, hi, my name is Ahmed, right? Because it's grabbing the name here, Ahmed, right? And this is how we call that object, or that this is called actually method. Let's write it here, method. So it's not called function, it's called method, but it is a function inside an object, right? So that you could do a lot of stuff with the object. That's mainly the main important part of it. It has methods. So if we look for something like JavaScript object methods, there's a ton of them, right? Just like arrays have methods, JavaScript also has methods. It has like things like push. You could push things to it. Not push, but you could add things to it. You could delete it. You could it's called entries. There's a lot of them. I'm just showing you this because it's gonna come up in the assignment. So you could go reference here. But any questions so far? This is kind of confusing part. I'm sorry, but this is this is called method, and it's a function inside the object. That's all it is. Any question? All right. So we just went through real quick. So go ahead and read this part. Just make sure you read because if you don't read it, then you're not gonna understand a lot of the stuff. Inside, you could use for loop with objects. You should read that, and also this keyword, which is really, really important in JavaScript, which we just in JavaScript in general, also in objects is really important. This is just basically referring to the object itself. So it's a little bit confusing, but if you read about it, it might make sense and practice. Let's quickly look at the assignment before we finish. So the assignment would just be like the last one. Make sure you do the whole forking here and then cloning and using the terminal and then grabbing and putting it in your computer. If you don't understand that part, we can go over it after this, or we can go over it tomorrow if you want, if I have time. So the assignment, so assignment is array functions and objects, right? So each one has its own stuff. Follow these instructions to submit the assignment. If you have any questions, let me know. Any questions about the assignment and how we're gonna do it? All right. Let me